Nobel for portrait is false.
நிறைய விவசாயிகள் கூட அதுல இந்த மாதிரி இடத்துல நம்ம இனிமேல் இளைஞர்கள் கூட ஒரு கருத்தரங்க வச்சு அவங்களோட கருத்து பரிமாற்றம் வந்து அவங்கள்ட்ட நமக்கு கற்றுக்க வேண்டியது என்ன இதே பிரபஞ்சம் இதே இடத்துல பார்த்தீங்கன்னா அப்படின்னு சொல்றது பருத்தியும் இயற்கையா விளைவிக்க வச்சு அதுல இருந்து ஹேண்ட் ஸ்பின்னிங் அண்ட் ஹேண்ட் வீவிங் பண்ணி கையில நூல் போட்டு அதை கை தெரியா இருந்துச்சு அதை இயற்கை சாயம் பூசி மேனுவலா ஸ்டிச் பண்ணி கொண்டு வந்து அந்த பருத்தி ஆடைகளையும் கொடுத்து இங்க 5 வாழ்வாதாரங்களையும் முன்னெடுத்துட்டாங்க. அதுவும் ஸோ இந்த இடத்துல இந்த மாதிரி விஷயங்களை இன்னும் மறுப்புறதுக்கான நம்ம தீர்மானம் பண்ணி இளைஞர்கள்
It's an honor to be introducing 3 of the people who probably have inspired a lot of organic farmers, people who have been part of organic farming movement across this country. ஆனா அவங்க 3 பேர் திருப்பி மாத்தி they've been saying we are three donkeys getting three இது அது நிறைய சொல்றாங்க. அதெல்லாம் நம்மளால சொல்ல முடியாது.
3 donkeys are going to pray again.
So but these are 3 people who have spoken. They just discussing about it since 1970. 79-80. Since 79-80, they have been part of the organic farming movement, including the first ones that got started across this country. முதல்ல ஆரம்பிச்சதுலேருந்து they have been part of the movement. And இன்னைக்கு it is just a coincidence that ஆரோவில் ஃபெஸ்டிவல் இங்கே நடக்கையில் ஆரோவில்லேருந்து நிறைய பேர்கள் இங்கே வரும்போது we happen to be talking about is it possible to Bernard இங்கே நம்ம கூப்பிட முடியுமா அப்படின்னு யோசிக்கும் போது as a coincidence Claude இங்கே வரதா இருந்துச்சு. Just a coincidence that Claude happened to be coming at this time when Oral Festival has been going on, and we were thinking about whether we should get Bernard here. And then they both agreed, and then Professor also said he also agreed because we thought why not, we got a bit more ambitious and eager and said let's get all the 3 of them together on one place. And it's a magic moment for many of us because we have individually probably interacted with each one of these people, but collectively to get them all in one place is definitely an important moment for all of us. It's a honor, and I don't have to introduce each one of them separately. Claude is probably the I would say today an intellect, also an organic farming enthusiast, one who's created several networks, movements, inspired people, publisher who has been publishing, writing. I mean, we have R.R. Alvares here, Claude's wife and partner, and one who's probably most of us have read have been changed in our minds about other India books. Other India books நால வந்து மாற்றப்பட்ட ஒரு நிறைய பேர் இருப்பாங்க. நம்ம யாரும் தொடாம அதர் இந்தியா புக்ஸ் தொடாமல் இருந்திருக்க வாய்ப்பே இல்லை. மோஸ்ட் ஆஃப் அஸ் எங்கேயாவது ஒரு பாயிண்ட்ல எப்பயாவது ஒரு இடத்துல அதர் இந்தியா புக்ஸோட புத்தகங்கள் படிச்சிருக்கோம். ஸோ எனக்கு ஞாபகம் இருக்கு, நான் முதல்ல வந்து 1998 when I first met Claude, I went to take signature in his book, autograph from him, and he said, "What? You're still reading this book?" And I was very surprised that somebody is still reading Decolonizing in Mind. And he said, "Okay, let your journey be good." And something like that he scribbled and he wrote it down. That was the last meeting of R.R. in Rishi Valley when I first met him. And since then, Claude has been part of several initiatives, particularly the Multiversity, the Organic Farming Association of India. The 2 organic farming source book that we have seen has also come from other India books. Bernard is known today across Tamil Nadu as Nammalvar's Guru by a lot of people who refer to him like that, because Nammalvar used to always call him my Guru. Bernard has been inspiring by his work in the field, and those who have visited and spent time with him in the field would know the wisdom that goes with his work in the field, manifesting from soil, reviving the soil and giving it a new life, and thereby creating magic and sharing it with a lot of compassion with anybody who comes there. Professor Ismail is probably, when I still refer to him always as one of the best introductions given to him was by Claude, who said Ismail is probably the best teacher, one of the best teachers India has ever produced. And probably one of the best teachers in the world. Anybody who has ever been into any of his lectures always feels, why was I not his student? Unfortunately, by the time I met him, I had already spent too much time being a student in life. So, but we consider, all of us consider him his students today. I wouldn't take too much further time because we are here to listen to them. Again, the reason why we started to talk about seeds today, because we are at a very critical juncture. Like Radhika just now suggested a very nice subject. Professor Ismail had said, Claude, Bernard and Ismail. It is a CBI that is visiting the OFM today. So we were saying, let it be a CBI inquiry into the great gene robbery. That was Radhika's title, she suggested, which I think is a good beginning because many of us in the last days, I was very surprised, many of us, the last 10 days, a lot of people have read The Great Gene Robbery, an article that Claude wrote in the 80s in the Illustrated Weekly of India, all over again. When I have told that about 1,000 people have read it in the last week. Nobody paid him anything. Well, those he wrote about always got paid more than what Claude ever gets paid, probably. So, I'll just immediately pass it on. All three of them have at different times said, what do I talk today? But I'm sure they have enough to share with us. I just told them it will be a very informal session. And which one will go first? I think Claude will start first. Thanks.
I don't know why I'm always being predicted. But since we have been talking about donkeys, I'm going to tell you my favorite donkey story from Mullah Nasiruddin. How many of you heard of Mullah Nasiruddin? Some of the older people. The younger people don't know nowadays because they don't tell them anything. Nasiruddin jokes. So Nasiruddin, Mullah's wise man, had a donkey. And his neighbors would come and borrow the donkey for work. And eventually, every time. Hello. Yeah. Every time the neighbor returned the donkey after work, the donkey was in very bad shape because he would exploit the donkey and beat him up and so on. So one day, the mullah said, "No more donkeys for this guy. I am not going to give him my donkey for any further work because he mistreats him, treats him very badly." So finally, saw one day the man coming up the street and he said that, "I know what he's coming for. He's coming for the donkey." So he immediately took the donkey and tied it behind his house where it couldn't be seen. So this man came up to the gate and he said, "Mullah, I want the donkey today, some work." So the mullah put on a big act. He said, "Donkey? There's no donkey. I sent him a few weeks ago to my relatives because they wanted to use him for some work." Just at that moment, bloody donkey starts braying behind. So the man looks at the mullah, and the mullah looks at the man, and then the mullah says, "Well, it's up to you whether you want to believe a wise man or a donkey." So it's up to you whether you want to believe what these three people are saying, whether they are going to talk to you as wise men or as donkeys. We have no problem at all. We have gone through life a great deal as donkeys, and we have made a lot of people unhappy. We have been very stubborn with the things that we have wanted to do. Somebody who is more stubborn to this thing for the last 30-40 years must be an extremely stubborn person in terms of the fixation of a particular idea. And we have, over the last 30-40 years, all three of us, we have more or less interwoven our work in organic farming with other things. Because you find in the end that you can't speak of organic farming unless you also talk of other things, like organic learning, for example. Learning is also has to be, you can't have artificial learning and organic farming. It doesn't go together. They must be more or less in the same environment. So you can't say that I will produce organic food, but I will send my children to a school where they will be alienated from the land and they will be alienated for everything that is organic, and they will end up finally more suited to working in a factory or an industry. They are completely alienated from life. So that's not possible. These two things are not possible. So in the end, you tend to look at everything that's involved in organic in terms of these things, in the terms of their interconnections. You can't do organic, for example, without looking after the soil. And then finally, after all this, we realize that you can't do anything really without proper seeds. And we failed for many years because there were just no longer seeds available. If you wanted, because of the current practices of maintaining seeds, all seeds have to be coated with chemicals. Why? Because if they are attacked by small insect or fungus or whatever it is, then they won't germinate. So the coating of seeds with chemicals became a way of life. There was no way out of it. If you wanted to get even seeds from abroad, you had to keep them 15 days in customs, where again they would pump them with all sorts of chemicals because they are in quarantine. As though those quarantine measures are going to be of great use, but the condition was that we were finally ending up trying to do organic, but the very first step in organic, that is the seed, which is the focus of all our affections, that came to us coated with the most deadly poisons. Then, of course, we began this whole process of trying to look for original seeds, organic seeds. In the meantime, the government of India, agricultural institutions had introduced, of course, a lot of hybrid seeds into the market. So we had the original seeds, what we call the heirloom varieties or the farmers' varieties, getting now displaced, sometimes mixed up with hybrid seeds, which are two totally different things. And then finally, of course, in the last 10 years, we have been fighting this Monsanto battle. All the organic farming community more or less convinced that this is the last frontier, and if we don't fight it, then we lose everything. It's not that we will lose only a few things, but we lose everything. When hybrid seeds came into the market, we did not really lose the original seeds. Those who went into hybrid seeds, they used the hybrid seeds. Then since they were not brought up in the use of hybrid seeds, they began to figure out that they used these seeds, and they found that after 2 or 3 generations they began to deteriorate, and they were not able to produce well. Then they said there's something wrong with the seeds. But that's not a culture. Hybrid culture is you have to go back and buy hybrid seeds back and back from the market. Otherwise, they tend to degenerate after 2 or 3 generations. But this is something that farmers have never faced. Because farmers throughout the centuries, for 5,000 years, for 10,000 years, for I don't know how many thousand years, have used and selected and maintained the purity of seeds without any problem. Nowadays we think that only scientists and gene banks maintain seeds. But if I just give you one example of the rice varieties, the number of rice variety seeds that are available, there were in between 1966 and probably maybe for at least 20 years, I was working in the area at that time, there were 300,000 varieties of only rice seeds. 300,000 varieties. Now you would say, what sort of a madman is this? that creates 300,000 varieties. And why did they create 300,000 varieties? But they did. And they created them in different agroclimatic zones and all that. And you may think that this is an exaggeration. I physically inspected the gene banks of the International Rice Research Institute. They had 72,000 varieties. Bulk of them had come from India, taken without permission. I physically visited the Central Rice Research Institute in Cuttack. They had 68,000 varieties. But those are all Indian varieties kept there. I physically visited Richaria's Institute, where there were 19,000 varieties, maintained not in the gene bank but in the fields. And this is not something which is unusual. Today we have a very interesting scientist called Debal Dev. Actually has left the scientific community and is doing farming work. He has got in his fields now 900 varieties of rice which he is growing in his fields and just maintaining them as something that ought to be done. And he doesn't understand why the agricultural system is not doing it and why other people are doing it. But alone, a single individual maintaining 900 varieties in his field. You can go to his farm in Orissa and you will find them there. Why this diversity? Who created this diversity? Nowadays we think that modern science creates diversity. Actually, modern science is known to create homogeneity, oneness, one appearance, one type. So if you look at rice itself, you will find that there are two major varieties that have come out from the International Rice Research Institute from 1966 till today. There's IR8 and IR36, which are the only two varieties that are really known. And you try and compare this with 300,000 varieties that this society created, and which is not scientific institutions as such, not research institutions as such, but ordinary farmers who created. How did they create these varieties? By the amazing skill of selection. Selection was the basis of getting these varieties. They would find a variety which has got some features which they like, and they would select it and they would maintain that variety. They would find another variety which had some useful characteristics, they would select that and they would maintain that, and they would let the others go. So by the process of selection, that is just the process of sorting out things, they were enabled to reach this enormous diversity in the number of seeds that they were able to not just collect but use on a regular basis, year in, year out, for thousands of years. Now we have lost that skill. Now we have really lost that skill. And now most of our farmers go to markets, they go to traders, they go to dealers, and they go. And we have lost a good deal of many of these varieties. I mean, in some pockets you will still find people using these. I mean, I want to buy some seeds. I go to my market in Mapsa, I buy some seeds from those old ladies there because their seeds are still very well maintained. They germinate and they will always, grow and they will give you some fruits. But by and large, the seed is becoming a very serious problem for all of us. Now, that is what we should worry about, because if you look at your food, what you eat every day is seed. Many people in cities don't understand what you're eating, but they're eating seed. The same rice that you are eating with its shell will grow into another rice plant. So in between, you take out the skin and you eat it, but it's seed that you are eating. Wheat, it's seed that you are eating. When you eat a banana, it's seeds that you're eating. When you eat an apple, it's seeds that you're eating. When you're eating a jackfruit, it's seeds that you're eating. And all these things are coated in nature, by nature, in the form of seeds, only so that they can grow. Why are fruits sweet? So that people will be attracted to them, eat the pulp, leave the seed aside, and the seed will grow. But these are all inducements of nature to try and make you see that you keep spreading those seeds around, because by themselves, if you have a jackfruit tree, the jackfruit will get ripe on the tree, the seeds will fall there, they will afterwards rot, and they will not germinate because there will be immediately monsoon, insects will come, do all sorts of things. But if you get the chance to eat the jackfruit, then you will take the seeds of a very good jackfruit. You will not take a poor class jackfruit that you brought from the market and it didn't taste sweet, you will not maintain that seed. But if it's a good seed, it's a good papaya, you say, this type of red papaya with very few seeds inside, with extraordinary good taste, I will see that these seeds are taken, you will dry them and you will keep them in the sun, and then finally you will propagate them, and you then participate in the act not only of selection but of maintaining that seed. And that is the way nature tricks us into ensuring that we keep the business of nature alive and propagating itself. Some part of it we participated, some parts of nature we don't participate, but does not mean that it has not found other mechanisms for duplicating those seeds. And so the process goes on. The whole process gets threatened when we lose that power over those seeds. When we no longer see seeds in those categories, and then we begin to surrender. And any society which surrenders control over its seeds begins eventually to surrender control over itself. That is the only thing that I would like to give you today, because I've seen it in terms of the way we bring up our children, in the way many things happen. A seed by itself is an autonomous, sovereign piece, living piece of nature. It requires some help to germinate. Some seeds have to be put in hot water because the shells are so hard. And if you don't give them a boil, they will not easily germinate. Some seeds will rot very easily. If you put too much of water, you will get nothing out of it. Each seed has got its own mechanism, and in each case, you have to provide that little nudge for them to be able to germinate. And you look how closely that is linked to the way we bring up our children also. Our children also can be brought up in the same way. We either look at our children as seeds, which require just that little nudge. Once they have that nudge, they grow. And they begin to flourish. And then you think of those gardeners who complain about their seeds, but actually you have smothered your seeds with so much of soil and so much of water and so much of chemicals that in the end the plant that you get is not a healthy plant and may not survive. In the same way, the child that you have, if you don't allow the child to grow, to conduct itself, to bring out its inner joy of being, which is there in itself, but you smother it with history and geography and civics and all these sort of things for 25 years of its life, you have finished that seed also. That seed is gone. There's nothing left in that seed. It's just one more input into this madness that is developed everywhere, where they want basically these type of seeds which have been tampered with, which have been hounded, which have been tied up with all types of things, finally put into a particular type, shape, so that they can be made useful, not for themselves, but for something else. As human beings, insofar as we are able to ensure that the seed gets just that right encouragement to germinate, and then from that small seed to become this huge tree on its own, without any fertilizer, and without any pesticide. I ask my friends, go over the whole of Chennai city and ask who has put fertilizers and who has put pesticides for these trees. And nobody has ever seen it. They were a small seed one stage, but they have grown on their own because they got that right inducement from nature in the form of the monsoon, in the form of some protection and so on. After that they came up on their own because that's given in the seed. That life is there in the seed. A small seed like that can grow into a huge oak tree. It is because of the potential which is in that seed. We don't see it. We say, oh, it's a small seed. What is the small seed going to do? But if it doesn't get that right inducement, and just that one, if you give it, you say, oh, this is such a small seed, how will it grow into a big tree? We would have to give it some 2,000 bags of fertilizer and who knows what else, just so that it can get that mass to reach up to that stage. Then we are gone. This is what we do to our children. But if you treat everybody in that particular way, then chances are that the youngster, the child, with that little bit of inducement, will become himself, will develop himself, will bring out whatever is the creative part of himself which has been formed as a union of his mother, father, the new unique being that has been created between the two, and which has got everything inside to become a perfect human being, creative, able to achieve whatever he or she feels they should be able to achieve. But all our lives we spend trying to actually prevent that from happening. We call it the education system, but the education system is meant to ensure that all the seeds that we are don't become what we should become. We should become graduates for banks. We should become accountants for accountants' offices. We should become workers to make motor cars. We should become 1,000 different things, but we should not be ourselves. But that's the lesson that I just thought that I would reflect upon. I did not come here to talk to you. I came here because I was on my way to the Andamans and I've been hijacked in a certain sense. Then I said, how do I protect my reputation and my integrity? I said, I will come here and I will market Tula shirts. So I promptly went up and bought a nice Tula shirt so that you can see how beautiful people, even ugly people like me, how good we look when we wear Tula clothes. So thank you very much for listening to this donkey brain.